Hey everyone, Pushing Up Roses here. Today I'm going to be discussing That Dragon Cancer, which was released on Steam just a couple days ago. In all honesty, I initially felt weird about doing a video on this game. It's just such a personal project, I don't think I could review it in a traditional sense. I can't really tell you whether or not to buy this title, or whether it's going to be within your tastes, or even if you'll find any fulfillment from it, and I just don't feel right critiquing it in the same way I would another title, so I won't be talking about the mechanics or the design, because those things feel extremely trite to me compared to the content. It's still a review in its own right, it'll just be more focused on how I personally relate to it and how it made me feel on a personal level, versus a more critical review. That Dragon Cancer tells a story of a little boy named Joel, whom you learn is suffering from cancer. The way you experience this is through some mild interaction and trigger points. The story is told in small sections, and the main thing you, the player, need to do is just listen and witness what is happening. The atmosphere is very heavy. I went into it telling myself that there's no way I was going to cry, and that I had heard so many stories of cancer and loss that it somehow made me immune to physical sadness. I expected to be internally mournful, but not devastated by the story. But very early on into the narrative, I felt weepy and I could not control it. I realized that I wasn't crying because of the specific story that was being told to me, the story of Joel and his family, and their trials and tribulations as they cope with their baby's illness. The story of Ryan and Amy Green, Joel's parents, is extremely melancholic, but that wasn't what triggered my sadness. I was upset over my own story and how the game seemed to reflect it so well. I lost my dad to brain cancer, and if I were to create something to express my feelings and grief, it would be very akin to That Dragon Cancer. This game is very heavy. You can feel its weight, and a lot of the imagery is weird and abstract with a lot of metaphoric visuals. The very title alone, That Dragon Cancer, is very poignant to me. Cancer as this fire-breathing dragon, this really intimidating, beastly creature that no one has ever seen before because it exists only in our imagination. But despite having never seen a tangible body, the dragon is a scary thought that causes destruction. Its capabilities are immense, often depicted as destroying towns and cities and castles. That is what it felt like to live with someone dying of brain cancer. It feels like this ominous thing that looms over you, and even though you can't see it on the outside, it destroys people. Both the person suffering and the family who have to watch that person suffer. It is crushing. Despite having lost my father to cancer, I can't imagine what it would be like to lose a child. The scenes where you have to watch Ryan try to comfort his young son are amongst the most heartbreaking I've ever experienced personally. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever felt such a profound sadness over any other title I've played. Joel is crying and screaming, and he won't stop because he's miserable, and there's nothing you can do about it.
No! Don't hit your head on the bars, Joel! Joel! I know you're mad. Please stop. Please. Stop.
You cannot comfort him, you cannot make him feel better, you can't even let him have anything to eat or drink because he vomits it up. And it keeps going, and he keeps screaming and crying, and you can feel the anguish, both from the child and the father.
It's so late, Joel. Lay down. I can't hold you. I can't make you feel better.
Even though I didn't lose a child, at the end of my father's life, he had basically turned into one. Brain cancer had done a number on his motor skills, and before he died, his talking became garbled. Many days I came home to him vomiting in the bathroom, and I felt much like how Ryan Green felt, helpless and frustrated. The interaction for this scene also feels exhausting and bleak. Ryan is expressing such angst over not being able to do much to help someone you love, and at the same time you're exhausted, and there's this feeling of resentment that comes with the experience. Not because you don't love the person, and not because you blame them for their illness, but just this cutting bitterness you feel after long stints of stress and hopelessness. I think the scenes in the hospital are some of the most hard-hitting, and I found it extremely tough to play through. I like that the game offers different perspectives. When someone in your life has cancer, there are so many other people affected, and everyone has a different view. I like that you can listen to some of the doctor's views, who has to break the bad news to the parents that they're going to lose their son. It gives you some perspective from Amy, Joel's mother, and how she's trying to cope with her own feelings, and sometimes it'll give you more abstract perspectives, like an animal looking in on Joel and watching him do something. This is much more about losing someone to cancer, though. It's also highly personal and shows the struggles between Amy and Ryan's relationship, which was sometimes strained by Joel's cancer, and it also tells of their conflicts with their own faith.
How can you say false hope? You're drowning!
Well, you're missing your oars, and you don't even know where you're going. And yet you're so sure you're gonna get there.
It's better than drowning.
Well, enjoy floating on the surface like you always do.
There's nothing deep about drowning. Just get in the boat.
You have to let me feel this!
This family believes in God, and Amy is hopeful that their faith will help them through and heal them, and she remains very optimistic. Ryan is more unsure. This game does talk about God, but it didn't feel as though something was being forced on me, and trust me, I've had religion pushed on me all my life, and I can distinguish when it is in bad faith. Ha! Pun intended. Get it? Bad faith? Sorry, this review is getting really brooding, so I added a pun to lighten it up. In fact, this calls for a dad memory. Watching my dad suffer from brain cancer wasn't exactly a fun thing, but despite him being so sick, he always made the best of it, and he really tried his best to stay strong and happy. He always had music playing 24/7. He was always listening to something, and I remember one night we were in the dining room, because the dining room was the hot spot to hang out in my house, I guess. We were listening to music, and that night in particular, we were listening to Elton John. Someone save my life tonight, Sugar Bear. Man, I love Elton John. And right after the song finished, he looked at me, and I looked back at him, and with the most serious tone in his voice, like he had just discovered the fucking Holy Grail, he says, "Did you know that if Olivia Newton-John married Isaac Newton, divorced him, married Elton John, her name would be Olivia Newton-John Newton-John." Oh God. And then he proceeded to bust up laughing after his own revelation. My dad thought he was funny. I just wanted to share this little story with you guys because even though the experience with my dad having a terminal illness was overwhelmingly bad, there were also really silly, absurd moments, and those moments really shine through. I remember them the most, and I think the game is the same way. The game is very, very sad, but it has these very happy moments, and they do not go unnoticed. Well, I hope you guys really enjoyed this little bit of corniness. Back to the review. I'm not a religious person anymore, but I was raised Roman Catholic, and when something tragic happens in your life, it makes you question what you truly believe. This game shows how Ryan and Amy gain and lose their faith. It is an extremely common thing that happens when a loved one is sick. Even though the religious elements in this story don't match what I believe, it never bothered me. I'm relating with this game on a deeply personal level. However, this is not my story to tell. This is the writer's story, the writer's experience, and these are his honest feelings about his faith. And to be honest, I think a lot of people will relate to these elements. This game doesn't exist just to appease me, and I'd like to think that I'm mature enough to respect someone else's beliefs and just listen to what they have to say, even if I can't relate to it personally. Not everything can be about me all the time, or you either. Sometimes it's about someone else, and I respect that. That dragon cancer is not there to be enjoyed necessarily. It wasn't created to entertain people in ways that other media does. It's there to be shared and reflected on. It's not there to give you a lesson of life or even to tell you how to deal with losing a child or push morals on you. It's an experience, a story that I think a lot of people will really connect with, and I think it's important. And as I played it, I realized how important it was to me to know that other people have these situations, they know how it feels, and it gives people who don't know how it feels a chance to understand it. And some people might be asking, well, why do you want to play something so depressing? Why not play something happy like Super Mario or something like that? Well, have you ever felt so overwhelmed by something that you just can't stop yourself from crying or feeling emotional? It just hits you, and you feel your eyes well up upon remembering something from your life that triggers sadness, and the more your eyes fill with tears, the closer to crying you get. Just the very thought of crying is making you cry more. And then you sob, and you sob, and you sob, and you cry until your eyes are red and puffy and your body feels uncomfortable down to its very core. You exhaust yourself crying. But then you eventually stop, and you feel better. It's very rare that I cry over my father these days. He passed in January of 2000, so I've had a very long time to grieve. But there are days when I think of him and I just need to cry. The mental exhaustion prior to crying can be so distressing that sometimes letting it all out is an amazing release. Sometimes I listen to sad songs when I'm sad. Sometimes I watch sad movies. I want something to commiserate with. Sometimes I'm not ready to feel happy. Sometimes I pick up a sad narrative game for the same reason. And maybe you won't cry. Maybe you will just sit back and appreciate that dragon cancer. Truthfully, it's hard to call it a game, but in the end, I really don't care what it's called. It's something that appeals to gamers and people who already like the visual novel format. I would call it more of a project, a personal expression that you can interact with. And in my personal opinion, I think this project is something special and I appreciate its existence. It's very apparent to me that this title was created because the dev wanted to share his story. Even though I don't think it's necessarily a successful game, I do think it's a successful piece of art. I really appreciated it, and I have no regrets about my purchase. I am happy to support someone brave enough to tell such a deeply intimate story. The ending is something I also personally relate to, and even though it could have been much more depressing, trust me, this could have been so sad, it actually made me smile and giggle a little bit. I miss my dad all the time, and I wish he had never gotten cancer. I wish he had never been exposed to Agent Orange, and I think if only he hadn't been drafted to Vietnam, if only he hadn't been exposed, if only people knew about Agent Orange, could we have caught it sooner? Would he still be here? And what if a different treatment could have worked? Can he see me now? Is he in this personal paradise with Neil Diamond constantly on loop, and cookies available forever, and baseball cards stacked all around him? The what-ifs are maddening, but I know that I'm not alone in my thoughts. And I and other people need that sometimes, to know that someone else felt that same anguish and also got through it. It's not fun, it's not enjoyable, it's taxing. But I'm glad that dragon cancer exists, and I'm glad Ryan and Amy got to express their story and their experience with their beautiful son, Joel.